The gift of Allah after Abel's death. Story of Prophet Sheeth عليه السلام. Chapter 1. The gift after the first blood. The earth was still young, the soil soft beneath the feet of the first humans. Peace had once filled their valley, until envy darkened one heart. Habil, Abel, stood in obedience, offering his best sacrifice to Allah, while Qābil, Cain, burned with jealousy beside him. The Quran tells of that tragic moment. Then his soul encouraged him to kill his brother, so he killed him and became among the losers. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5:30. It was the first blood spilled on earth, the first crime of mankind. When Ādam alayhi salam and Ḥawwā alayhi salam saw what had happened, their sorrow was greater than words. Their family, the first family of humankind, had been torn apart by pride and anger. Years passed in mourning. Adam's voice, once raised in praise, now carried only grief. Ḥawwā's heart, once light with the joy of her children, ached with loss. From the Islamic sources in time, Allah's mercy descended upon them again. From that mercy came a new life, a son born in purity and peace. Ibn Kathir narrates in Qisas al-Anbiya, when Habil was killed, Allah granted Ādam alayhi salam another son in his place, and his name was Sheeth, Sheeth, meaning the gift of Allah. He was born circumcised, pure, and beautiful, the most resembling to Ādam alayhi salam of all his children. He grew under the watchful care of his parents, surrounded by remembrance and prayer. Ādam would often hold him close, saying, "You are the comfort from my Lord after the sorrow of Habil." Though the Quran does not mention Sheeth by name, early hadith and historical sources confirm his prophethood. The Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam said in a narration reported by Abu Dharr radiyallahu anhu, Allah revealed 100 scrolls and 4 books. 50 of these scrolls were revealed to Sheeth, Musnad Ahmad, Ibn Hibban. Thus, Sheeth alayhi salam became the first prophet after Ādam, chosen to continue divine guidance on earth. Ādam alayhi salam taught his son the knowledge of the hours of day and night, the acts of worship, and the commandments of purity and justice. He warned him, "Stay far from Qābil and his people, for they have turned from the truth. Lead your descendants with faith and patience." Before Adam's death, the angels descended carrying perfume and shrouds from paradise. They wrapped Ādam gently, and Sheeth led his funeral prayer, the first human burial guided by the angels themselves. According to early historians, the sun and moon dimmed for 7 days, and the world mourned the passing of its first prophet. After that, Sheeth alayhi salam became the leader and prophet among the righteous descendants of Ādam. He ruled with wisdom, teaching his people to worship Allah and to live in peace. All of Ādam's pure lineage continued through him, for the descendants of Qābil had turned to corruption and sin. From the Bible and Torah, the Bible, Genesis 4:25-26, records this same moment of renewal. And Ādam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and called his name Seth. For God said, "She hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew." It continues in Genesis 5:3-8. And Ādam lived 130 years, and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. And the days of Ādam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. From these verses, Jewish and Christian scholars concluded that Seth was the spiritual heir of Ādam, the one who preserved his moral image and faith. They viewed him as the father of all future generations, the appointed seed who replaced the slain Abel. The Bible also notes that through Seth's son Enosh, humanity once again turned to worship. Then men began to call upon the name of the Lord. Genesis 4:26. From the ancient Midrash and early traditions, the Midrash Bereshit Rabbah, an ancient Jewish commentary on Genesis, expands this story further. It tells that after Abel's death, Ādam and Eve separated for 130 years, each living in repentance and prayer. Then, by divine command, they reunited, and from that union was born Seth, described as the image of Ādam and the foundation of the generations of the righteous. Another account, found in the life of Ādam and Eve, adds a moving legend. When Ādam lay dying, he sent Seth to the gates of paradise to seek oil from the tree of mercy to anoint his body. The angel Gabriel met Seth and said, "The time of your father's death has come. The oil will be given only in the days of salvation." Seth returned with 3 seeds from paradise and placed them beneath Adam's tongue at his burial. From these seeds, says the old story, grew trees that would one day form the ark of Noah alayhi salam, and the staff of Moses alayhi salam, signs that divine guidance would continue through the line of the righteous. The new beginning. And so the first age of mankind closed, an age that began with life in paradise and ended with the mercy of Allah upon the earth. From grief, he brought a gift. From death, he raised a prophet. Through Sheeth, Seth, the light of guidance continued to shine. From his line would come Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, and Idris, Enoch alayhi salam, prophets who carried the remembrance of Allah across generations. When the night fell upon the mountains where Adam was buried, Sheeth stood in prayer and said, "O Lord, you sent mercy after bloodshed, light after darkness, and hope after sorrow. Keep our hearts steadfast upon your truth." Thus began the second age of humanity, the age of Sheeth, the prophet of the first scrolls, the heir of Adam, and the living symbol of Allah's mercy upon mankind. Chapter 2. The Two Tribes, the Righteous and the Corrupted. When Adam alayhi salam was laid to rest, the wind carried his name across the mountains and valleys. Every creature that had seen him mourned, for the first prophet had returned to his Lord. Upon his death, his son Sheeth alayhi salam became the new leader of humankind, the chosen prophet and guardian of divine guidance. The people listened, their hearts softened by his wisdom. For many years, peace spread through the mountains where the descendants of Sheeth lived. They prayed, worked the land, and remembered Allah in all they did. No blood was shed, no arrogance grew, and no falsehood was spoken. It was said that Sheeth's people were pure of heart, their faces radiant with faith, and that the angels walked among them to bless their gatherings. From the Islamic sources, according to Ibn Kathir and Al-Tabar, mankind at that time became divided into 2 nations, the descendants of Sheeth, who lived upon the mountains and followed the way of Allah, the descendants of Qābil, who settled in the valleys and plains, turning away from divine guidance. Sheeth had commanded his people, "Do not mix with the children of Qābil, and do not descend to their land, for their hearts are corrupt, and their ways are filled with sin." For generations they obeyed this command, but Shaitan, the enemy of mankind, did not rest. He came to the valley dwellers, the children of Qābil, disguised as a handsome young man. He entered the workshops where men forged metal and began teaching them new skills. He made the first musical instruments, the flute, the drum, and the stringed lyre. Then he said to them, "Gather in the evenings and I will play for you." They gathered. The sound of music rose through the valley, echoing against the mountains. The people began to dance and forget their Creator. Thus, according to Ibn Kathir, the first songs and instruments were invented, not for remembrance, but for distraction and desire. Over time, Shaitan whispered, "Invite the people of the mountains to your celebrations, that they may see how joyous you are." And so the corruption began to spread. The first temptation, Sheeth alayhi salam, had warned his followers to remain upon the mountain and never descend to the valley. He said, "There are men and women there who follow Shaitan. Do not mix with them." But curiosity grew in the hearts of the younger generations. One day, a group of young men from Sheeth's tribe stood at the edge of the mountain and looked down upon the valley. They saw bright fires, dancing shadows, and the beauty of the women below. In the traditions narrated by Ibn Ishaq and Al-Tabar, it is said that Allah had created a distinction between the 2 tribes. The men of Sheeth's line were handsome, but their women were less so. The women of Qābil's line were beautiful, but their men were not handsome. To prevent temptation, Adam had forbidden intermixing between them. Yet now, driven by Shaitan's whispers, curiosity overcame caution. Some young men from Sheeth's tribe descended to watch the celebrations from afar. They saw the women adorned with jewels and silk, moving to the rhythm of flutes. Shaitan saw their hearts weaken, and he whispered again, "Why only watch from afar? Join them. You are all the same children of Adam." They came closer, and soon, one by one, they joined the gatherings. The people of the mountains and valleys mixed freely, and thus began the first corruption among the descendants of Adam. Music, vanity, and lust spread like smoke, dulling the remembrance of Allah. Sheeth alayhi salam's warning. When news reached Sheeth alayhi salam, he was heartbroken. He stood before his people and said, "You have broken the command of Allah and of your father Adam. You have followed Shaitan into temptation. Do you not see that he is your enemy?" But by then many hearts had turned away. Sheeth wept and prayed, "O Lord, forgive my people and protect the righteous among them. Do not let your guidance vanish from the earth." Despite his sorrow, Allah's promise remained. The light of truth would continue through Sheeth's righteous descendants. Among them would come Idris, Enoch alayhi salam, who would call humanity back to the worship of the one God. From the Bible and other writings, the Bible, Genesis 6:1-2, echoes the same idea of moral decline. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair. And they took them wives of all which they chose. Early Jewish commentators interpreted this passage as referring to the righteous descendants of Seth, who mingled with the corrupt descendants of Cain, leading to widespread sin before the flood of Noah. The Book of Enoch, one of the ancient texts attributed to Sheeth's lineage, also describes how humans learned vanity and music through the deception of fallen beings, a reflection of the same tradition preserved in Islamic narrations. The two paths. From that day, humankind was divided, not by land or language, but by faith. Those who followed Sheeth alayhi salam remained firm upon Tawhid, the oneness of Allah. Those who followed Qābil's way sank deeper into arrogance and desire. This was the beginning of the world's corruption, the slow decline that would one day bring the flood in the time of Nuh alayhi salam. But for now, the light still burned in the mountains, where Sheeth alayhi salam and his faithful followers continued to worship Allah in sincerity. At night, when the stars filled the sky, Sheeth alayhi salam would look toward the valley lights below and whisper, "O Lord, guide them before the darkness consumes them." Chapter 3. The Scrolls of Sheeth, the first revelation. The night sky above the mountains was calm and clear. The stars glittered like lamps hung by angels, and the air carried the fragrance of the earth after rain. There, on a high ridge, Prophet Sheeth alayhi salam stood in prayer, his hands raised toward the heavens, his heart trembling with remembrance. He was no longer young. The years of leadership had turned his beard white, but his eyes still shone with wisdom and patience. Around him, his people had grown in number, farmers, shepherds, and families who lived in peace and obedience to Allah. They followed the teachings that had come to Sheeth through divine revelation, written upon scrolls of light. From the Islamic sources, in a hadith narrated by Abu Dhar, radiyallahu anh, the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam said, "Allah revealed 100 scrolls and 4 books. 50 of those scrolls were revealed to Sheeth, peace be upon him." Musnad Ahmad, Ibn Hibban, Al-Hakim. These scrolls, known as Suhuf Sheeth, Sahaf Sheeth, are considered by early scholars to be the earliest divine scriptures revealed to mankind after Adam alayhi salam. Though the Quran does not record their exact content, early Islamic tradition describes their purpose. They were a guide for moral life, teaching humanity how to live in harmony, purity, and justice. Ibn Kathir narrates in Qisas al-Anbiya that Allah revealed to Sheeth the following: the laws of worship, the remembrance of Allah at appointed hours, the prohibition of bloodshed, envy, and arrogance, the guidelines for marriage, family, and modesty, the principles of justice in trade, speech, and judgment, the remembrance of paradise and the warning of hellfire. Sheeth alayhi salam would sit upon a high place at dawn, teaching his people, "O my people, this world is a passage, not a home. Do good, for every deed will be written, and every soul will meet its Lord." He taught that every sunrise was a reminder of resurrection, every nightfall a reminder of death, and every storm a sign of Allah's power. He taught humility, that the proud are the first to fall. And he reminded his people that wealth and beauty are only tests, not rewards. Thus, the descendants of Sheeth lived by divine law, while the followers of Hābil in the valleys grew further in corruption. Between them, the difference was clear. One lived for eternity, the other for desire. The structure of the Suhuf scrolls. According to early Muslim scholars, the 50 scrolls of Sheeth were not a single book, but a collection of divine lessons, much like parables and moral codes. Some accounts preserved by Ibn Ishaq mention that they contained reminders of Tawhid, oneness of Allah, warning mankind against idols and false worship, descriptions of the soul, how it can be purified or corrupted, guidance on gratitude and repentance, signs of the end of times and the coming of later prophets, including Noah alayhi salam. In Islamic belief, these were the first written revelation to humans, symbols of Allah's mercy, sent not on tablets or paper, but preserved through memory and oral teaching among Sheeth's descendants. In the Bible and Torah, the idea of divine communication through Seth is more subtle but still present. In Genesis 4:26 it is said, "And to Seth also there was born a son, and he called his name Enosh. Then men began to call upon the name of the Lord." Jewish and Christian interpreters understood this as the beginning of organized worship, when humanity once again turned to prayer and the remembrance of God. According to rabbinic commentary, Midrash Bereshit Rabbah 23:6, this verse marks the restoration of monotheism after Cain's rebellion. In other words, through Seth's line, worship and divine law were renewed upon the earth. The Torah's genealogies, Genesis 5, record Seth as the spiritual ancestor of the prophets who came after him: Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, and Enoch, Idris alayhi salam, each preserving and building upon the teachings first given to Sheeth. From the ancient apocryphal and midrashic texts, the ancient Jewish-Christian text, The Life of Adam and Eve, also known as Apocalypse of Moses, describes Seth as the guardian of secret knowledge inherited from his father. When Adam was dying, he told Seth, "You are the son of my heart. Keep the commandments of your Lord and teach them to your children, for from your line will come those who will call upon his name." In this text, Seth receives sacred instructions from Adam and passes them to Enosh, thus preserving divine wisdom through generations. Similarly, in the Book of Jubilees, a 2nd century BCE Hebrew text, Seth is portrayed as a man of prayer and purity, who wrote down the commandments taught by his father and bound them upon the hearts of men. The Book of Enoch, attributed to Idris alayhi salam, Seth's descendant, echoes these teachings, saying that Enoch learned the wisdom of the ancients from the writings of Seth, which contained the laws of heaven and earth. These records align closely with the Islamic belief that Sheeth's scrolls were the first divine law revealed, a prophetic foundation for later scriptures like the Torah, Zabur, Injil, and Quran. The covenant renewed. As years turned into centuries, Sheeth alayhi salam gathered his people for one final address. The mountains glowed with the light of dawn, and his voice was calm but firm. "O my children, the path of your father Adam is the path of truth. Do not be deceived by the pleasures of the world, for they fade like shadows. Keep your hearts pure, and Allah will honor you among the righteous." He reminded them of the first blood spilled on earth, and of how mercy had followed through faith. He told them that prophets would continue to come from their line, men who would guide, warn, and remind, until the day when all would return to their Lord. Then Sheeth alayhi salam raised his hands and prayed, "O Allah, you are the most merciful. You gave us light after darkness and truth after loss. Keep our descendants steadfast upon your guidance until the end of time." The legacy of the scrolls. Long after Sheeth's passing, his teachings survived among the righteous. They were passed to Idris, Enoch alayhi salam, who would build upon them and teach men to write, to measure the stars and to seek knowledge. Though the original scrolls have vanished, their essence remains in every revelation that followed. For Allah's message is one. "Indeed, we have sent messengers before you. Among them are those whose stories we have related to you, and among them are those whose stories we have not related." Surah Ghafir 40:78. Thus ended the life of Prophet Sheeth, the prophet of the first scrolls, the keeper of Adam's covenant, and the bridge between the beginning of creation and the generations of revelation to come. Chapter 4. The Rise of Corruption. the whisper of Shaitan and the first sins. The mountains were still filled with prayer. Each dawn, the children of Sheeth عليه السلام rose to remember Allah, and each night they slept in peace. The air was pure, the people were honest, their hearts were clean. But far below, in the dark valleys where Qābil's descendants lived, a different story was unfolding, one that would test the very soul of mankind. From the Islamic sources, Ibn Kathir narrates that when Sheeth عليه السلام and his people remained steadfast in worship, Shaitan grew furious. He had already caused the death of Habil and the sin of envy, but now he sought something greater, to corrupt an entire generation. He came to the valley where Qābil's descendants had settled, a people who no longer remembered Allah or the warning of their forefathers. They lived for pleasure and desire, their days filled with laughter and their nights with forgetfulness. Shaitan appeared among them disguised as a young man, beautiful and clever. He began to teach them the craft of metalworking, how to shape iron into tools and instruments. Then he took a piece of hollow wood and blew through it, creating a strange and beautiful sound. The people were amazed. "Teach us more," they said. So he made the first drum, the first flute, and the first lyre, and he played melodies that stirred both joy and passion. They gathered around him every night, clapping, singing, and dancing, forgetting the remembrance of Allah. Thus, as Ibn Kathir writes, music and vanity were born among the children of Qābil, and Shaitan was the first to inspire it. It was the beginning of corruption, not through violence, but through temptation. The separation of the two peoples. For many generations, Sheeth عليه السلام had commanded his people to remain upon the mountains and never descend to the valleys. He said to them, "O my children, the people of Qābil are corrupted. Do not look toward them or envy their ways, for they follow Shaitan and have forgotten their Lord." They obeyed, until the whispers began. One evening, some young men climbed to the edge of the mountain and looked down. They saw fires burning in the valley and heard the echo of drums. Curiosity grew in their hearts. They saw women of great beauty, adorned with gold and colored silk, dancing beside the fires. The men of Qābil's tribe were rough and dark, but their women were beautiful. As Al-Tabara narrates, Allah had made the descendants of Sheeth handsome, but their women plain. And the descendants of Qābil had beautiful women, but men of poor appearance. This was a divine test, a barrier between purity and corruption. Yet curiosity overcame fear. Some of Sheeth's young men said, "Let us only look, we will not join them." So they descended a little. They stood near the valley, hidden among the rocks, watching the revelry below. The sound of the flute reached their ears, the light of the fires touched their faces, and their hearts began to change. The first great temptation. Seeing them watch, Shaitan smiled. He whispered to the people of Qābil, "Invite your brothers from the mountains. Show them your joy, your beauty, your freedom. Tell them there is no harm in celebrating life." So the valley people climbed the mountain paths, carrying gifts and songs. At first, the people of Sheeth refused, but curiosity became invitation, and invitation became mingling. Soon the men of Sheeth's tribe were descending often, and the first intermixing between the two nations began. The righteous people saw the beauty of Qābil's women and were enticed. The women saw the strength and nobility of Sheeth's men and were drawn to them. Desire overcame discipline, and from this mixing came the first great moral corruption on earth. As Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Kathir relate, this was the first collective sin after the death of Adam عليه السلام, free mixing, vanity, music, and adultery. The sorrow of Sheeth عليه السلام. When word reached Sheeth, he was filled with grief. He gathered his people and said, "O my sons, this is the work of Shaitan. Did I not warn you not to go down to the valleys? You have disobeyed your Lord, and corruption has begun among you." He wept as he prayed to Allah, "O my Lord, forgive those who have erred, and protect those who still hold your truth. Do not let the light of faith be extinguished from among the children of Adam." But the corruption spread, as curiosity became habit, and habit became sin. The world that once echoed with prayer now echoed with song and pride. From the Bible and Torah, Jewish scholars interpreted this passage not as angels but as the righteous descendants of Seth, Sheeth, who mixed with the corrupted descendants of Cain, Qābil. Their unions led to sin and arrogance, and the purity of worship faded from the earth. The Midrash Bereshit Rabbah comments, "The sons of the righteous saw the daughters of the wicked and fell into desire. From them came men who forgot the fear of God and filled the earth with corruption." This period of moral decay in both Islamic and Jewish tradition is what later led to the coming of Prophet Enoch alayhi salam, and eventually the flood in the time of Noah alayhi salam. The echo in ancient texts. The Book of Enoch, an ancient apocryphal text attributed to Idris alayhi salam, also describes this fall. It tells how men learned vanity, adorned themselves with jewels, and lost the knowledge of heaven. It says that the righteous sons looked upon the daughters of the earth and were led astray, echoing the Islamic version of Sheeth's warning and the temptation of his people. In these ancient writings, as in the Quranic and Islamic tradition, the moral lesson is the same. Sin begins with a whisper, curiosity becomes desire, and desire brings ruin. The decline of an age. Years passed. The valley grew louder with music and pride, while the mountain grew quieter. The followers of Sheeth dwindled in number, and righteousness became rare. Sheeth, alayhi salam, now old and weary, would climb to a high place at dusk and look toward the valley lights. He would whisper, "O Allah, the world forgets, but you never forget. Send among my descendants one who will renew the faith as my father and I did." And Allah accepted his prayer. From his descendants, generations later, would come Enoch alayhi salam, a prophet of wisdom and knowledge who would rise to the heavens and restore the call to truth. The lesson of the fourth age. The story of Sheeth's people teaches that corruption rarely begins with defiance. It begins with forgetfulness. Shaitan does not destroy faith with swords, but with entertainment, temptation, and pride. He turns remembrance into distraction, modesty into display, and purity into pleasure. But Allah's guidance never disappears. As the Quran reminds, "Indeed, those who say, 'Our Lord is Allah,' and then remain steadfast, upon them shall be no fear, nor shall they grieve." Surah Al-Ahqaf 46-13. And so, as the first corruption spread, the next stage of human prophecy began. The rise of Enoch alayhi salam, who would lift the teachings of Sheeth once more toward the heavens. Chapter 5. The final days of the gift. The legacy of Prophet Sheeth alayhi salam. The sun hung low over the mountain valleys where the children of Adam once walked. The world had changed. Rivers carved deeper paths, trees grew taller, and the tribes of mankind had spread far and wide. But high in the mountains, one home still echoed with remembrance of Allah. The home of the last of Adam's direct sons, Prophet Sheeth, Seth alayhi salam. He was now old, his beard white like snow, his eyes calm with the wisdom of a century of prophecy. From the time of his youth he had lived by one purpose, to preserve the message of his father Adam alayhi salam, and to keep the light of truth alive in the hearts of his people. The final years, according to Ibn Kathir and early historians, Sheeth alayhi salam was a prophet, scholar, and leader among mankind. He ruled with justice and knowledge, teaching his descendants to pray, to fast, and to worship Allah alone. He was given 50 scrolls, suhuf, of divine revelation, which contained guidance on faith, purity, and daily worship, the very first written scriptures in human history. Generations had passed under his care. He watched his children grow into nations, his cities rise from the soil, and his people learn the arts of agriculture, trade, and craft. Through his wisdom, Allah guided humanity from the simple beginnings of Adam to the foundations of civilization. But Sheeth also saw what lay ahead. He saw the pride growing in some hearts, the curiosity of the youth who looked toward the valley tribes, and the whisper of Shaitan calling mankind to vanity and desire. It was then, in his old age, that Sheeth gathered his family and followers for one last sermon. The last words of Sheeth alayhi salam. He stood upon a rock overlooking the valley where his father, Adam alayhi salam, had once walked. The wind carried his voice as he said, "O my children, Allah has honored you with the truth. He made your father from clay and breathed into him his spirit. He gave me to you as a mercy after your brother Habil's death. Do not let the whisper of Shaitan deceive you, as he deceived your ancestors before. Worship Allah alone, for there is no peace without His remembrance. He lifted his hands in prayer, tears flowing down his aged face. O Allah, forgive my people. Keep them steadfast upon the path of faith. Send among them prophets from my descendants, to remind them when they forget, and to guide them when they go astray. Those were among his final supplications. The death of Prophet Sheeth عليه السلام. When his time came, Sheeth عليه السلام knew that his life on earth was ending. According to the reports of Ibn Ishaq and Al-Tabar, he lived for 912 years, the same age mentioned for Seth in the Torah, Genesis 5:8. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. He gathered his sons and daughters and said, "When I return to my Lord, bury me beside my father Adam. Keep his grave and mine a place of remembrance for the righteous, not a shrine for the proud." And so when the angels came, the earth was still. They descended once more, carrying a shroud and perfume from paradise, just as they had done for Adam. After his passing, the heavens and the earth wept. The people of the mountain fasted for 7 days, and the light of prophecy was silent for a generation. Al-Tabari mentioned his lifetime 930 years, but other sources mentioned his lifespan 912 years. Some sources considered Sheeth's burial place a cave in Abu Qubay's mountain where Adam and Eve are buried. However, in Nabichit town in Baalbek region, east of Lebanon, there is a grave attributed to Prophet Sheeth. In Mosul, north of Iraq too, there is a grave attributed to Sheeth, which was demolished by ISIS in May 2014. The legacy lives on. But Allah does not leave His creation without guidance. From the descendants of Sheeth came Enosh, Kunan, Kenan, Mahla'al, Mahalalel, and Yard, Jared, a long line of righteous men who carried the memory of their forefather scrolls. And then among their descendants, Allah chose a new messenger, a man of wisdom and knowledge, the first to write, to teach, and to measure the stars, Prophet Idris, Enoch عليه السلام. Through him the story of Sheeth would continue, the scrolls of knowledge would rise again, and mankind would be reminded once more of their Creator. A final reflection. The story of Sheeth عليه السلام is the story of divine mercy after loss. He was the son given to Adam after the first murder on earth, a reminder that even after tragedy, Allah restores balance. He was the bridge between the innocence of creation and the rise of civilization, between the first garden and the first prophecy. His life teaches us that guidance begins with remembrance, and that faith is not inherited but renewed with every heart that believes. And though his name is seldom spoken, every prophet after him carried his light, the gift that never faded. Indeed, those who believe and do righteous deeds, for them are gardens beneath which rivers flow. That is the great success. Surah Al-Buruj 85:11. In the next video, we journey into the life of Prophet Idris, Enoch عليه السلام, the grandson of Sheeth, the man of science, patience, and revelation. He was the first to write, the first to sew clothing, the first to study the stars, and the first prophet to be raised alive to the heavens. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this series. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. Thank you for your watching.